Hello, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm Giselle Song, account manager here at Joorney, and I'll be your host today. Well, we will give it a minute so for people to join in, and feel free to drop in the chat box where you're from. And hi, David. Hi, Faraz and Nader. Hello. Yes, it's always great to see how this group, how global and international this group is. And little bit FYI, I'm based in Toronto, so hello from Toronto. Oh, Paula from Kitchener. Hi. So before we start, just a quick intro about Joorney Business Plan. So we work with immigration professionals, like you are, and immigration lawyers and immigration consultants, right? So we provide business plans and support documents for a wide range of business immigration applications. So hi Joel from Alberta. And at Joorney, I will say the C11 entrepreneur and self-employed business plan, as well as ICT, are always there. We're doing them almost every day. And also recently, we've seen a rise on the free trade agreement category for both ICT and self-employed, like the investor type as well. But last but not least, PNPs, which is one of our topics today. Let me see. Hi, AJ from Surrey, BC. So it's a very early morning for you. Okay, let's wait a few seconds here. And a quick note, if you guys have questions, you can see beside the chat box, there is Q&A box. So you can type your questions in the Q&A box. So we will go through as much questions as possible near the end. So we will leave about 10 minutes for the Q&A session, and you can put all your questions there. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so let's come back to our topic today. That is Alberta PNP, the farm stream. It's a very special stream and a very specialized pathway. Let's put it that way because it's quite technical. And plus, the application format is a little bit different compared to the other streams because it's a direct application process. There is no EOI, which Alicia will go deeper later. And okay, let's see. Patricia from Calgary, welcome. So let me introduce our guest, Alicia here. Alicia Backman-Beharry, and she's an immigration lawyer, and she works at Holthe Immigration Law, where she has been part of the team since 2020. But she has over 20 years of immigration law practice herself. She was called to the bar, Alberta bar, in 2003 and has practiced across a wide range of settings, from large and boutique law firm to poverty law clinic, and she's a sole practitioner. Alicia's practice focuses on business immigration, temporary and PR applications for individuals and families. And Alicia has taught immigration courses as well. She held immigration leadership roles within the Canadian Bar Association, CBA, and she served for 9 years on the board of one of Alberta's largest immigrant serving organizations. Alicia is well known for her ability to help clients understand which immigration pathways best suit for their circumstances, and we're very fortunate to have her here today. So, Alicia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Giselle, and I'm happy to be here. And it is really great to see people from all over the world joining and learning more about Alberta and the PNP program in Alberta, because it is always changing. And that seems to be the theme with immigration in general, but it is also the theme with immigration provincially. And so
Yes.
especially in Alberta. So even though I have been called to the bar and practicing in Alberta at Holthe Immigration Law, we work on various applications across the country, lots of express entry, lots of business immigration and intercompany transfers and those sorts of things. And I can tell when I look at other provinces and we do OINP applications or BC PNP applications, it's a little bit more predictable.
Yeah.
Compared to Alberta. And so this is always
Okay.
the challenge with Alberta is that literally there are no guarantees when we're looking at any sort of Alberta application. And I'll come back to that as we go through the questions.
Yes, exactly. And my question first to be, what is the quota compared to 2025? What is the quota for AAIP? Or if you have um, a general idea about the different streams, or we can just narrow down to farm stream.
Mhm. And so again, Alberta is really holding their cards quite close to their chest. And so we know what the allocation was for 2025. So in 2025, we had fewer allocations. So compared to 2024, basically the allocations got cut in half. Then for 2025, we had a little bit less than 6,000. And then all of a sudden, at the very end of the year in September, they said, oh, we have a few more allocations. So they gave another 1,528 allocations the end of September. So the final allocation for 2025 was 6,403. And that is the same
Mhm.
allocation that is set for 2026. So we're still dealing with not a ton of people, only 6,403 allocations across all streams for the entire year.
Mhm.
So this is not farm stream, this is everybody in the entire PNP for Alberta, 6,000
Mhm.
people. So it is really been knocked down from what it historically had been a few years ago.
Yeah.
That, yeah, that said, there was an announcement. So one thing I would recommend is if you are looking at filing an application through Alberta, keep a close eye on what's going on. Go take a look at the updates. So Alberta has an updates page, and then it also has a processing inventory page. And so,
Mhm.
you can take a look at that processing inventory page, and it gives you some information in terms of where are we so far in the year. And one
Yeah.
of the things they've mentioned on the updates page is that federally, anybody who's following immigration in Canada knows that French is a big thing in immigration. And so Francophone and being able to speak French is huge. I've been telling any of my clients who have facility in a second language, and some of them already speak 3 languages, but I said, if you can learn French, do it because it's worthwhile. So what's happened federally is there are more PNP allocation spots, so 10,000 across all of the provinces and territories,
Yeah.
if that is a Francophone candidate. So for example, in Alberta, I have one candidate who is just qualifying under the regular express entry accelerated tech stream. But because one of the things in their EOI profile mentions Francophone, they were actually drawn on a notification of interest because of that French. So there's a little bit of a top up. Alberta has not
Yeah.
said how many of that 10,000 they get under the Francophone allocations.
That's hidden from us, right? So we know like across the whole country we have 10K quotas, but we don't know like which province gets how much.
Right,
We don't know.
right.
That's a mystery, right? And so here's my second question. So how well does the farm stream align with Alberta's current agricultural and economic priorities? I think they're, pushing very hard on that front.
hmm So they definitely are. Alberta is economically focused. And so, especially for the PNP streams, across all the streams in Alberta, they are really
Mhm.
looking for people who have strong connection to Alberta already. And most of the time, so again, there's a disclaimer on their website that says we don't have to even consider any application you submit, even if you meet all the eligibility criteria.
Mhm.
So, but given that, one of the strong factors that they do consider is employment. So, having been previously employed in Alberta, having family in Alberta, or having a job offer in Alberta. So, we know there's a strong focus on economic activity. We also
Mhm.
know that there are a number of entrepreneur streams in Alberta. So, when we're looking
Yeah.
at Alberta and we're looking at the allocations or what's been happening historically, in Alberta for all of the entrepreneur streams. We know for 2026, they have a nomination allocation for all entrepreneur streams for 90 positions. That's it. And there are 4. Farm
Mm.
stream's only one of them.
Okay, right. And here brings my next question. So, what makes the farm stream different from the other AAIP streams? Let's just narrow it down to the entrepreneurial streams
Yep.
and compared it to the farm. We all know it's a direct application for the farm stream. Does that mean less documents required for farm stream or more flexibility for farm stream?
I would not say so, no.
Okay.
It is literally like the last person standing in terms of the ability to direct apply. So if you look at all other Alberta PNP streams, they've completely moved to an expression of interest. And when we
Yeah.
look at the other entrepreneur streams for Alberta. So there's the rural entrepreneur stream. It's an expression of interest. The forms are not even available online. You have to get a request from AAIP before you can even submit that business application. So rural entrepreneur is one. There's the graduate entrepreneur. That's based on points and again going into an expression of interest pool. And then there's the foreign graduate entrepreneur stream, same thing, but this time a designated agency actually has to work with you in addition. And so out of those entrepreneur streams, the only one where you can direct apply is the farm stream. And I think they have really made it so that you have to front end your application with absolutely everything that you want to have considered, because they can return that application. They don't have to process it. There's nothing saying that first in is first assessed. And so, yes, you can submit an application, but it better be a substantial application. And they also have really discouraged people putting in frivolous applications because of the processing fee. So, just a
Um,
note for everybody, the processing fee in 2024 used to be $500, and then after April of 2024, it's now $3,500.
so goes the oil price. Okay. And speaking of the eligibility and the practical approval or reality, my next question is even if someone technically qualifies, right? And what actually determines whether they got approved?
Mhm. And so, again, this is literally, if you take a look at Alberta's website, they can close a stream with no notice. They
Yeah.
can change a stream with no notice. They can completely say that a rural community is no longer on the list of acceptable rural communities if you're looking at that stream. So they have 100% discretion to do what they want. So when we're
Mm,
looking at eligibility, it's just a first step. And they actually say that on the website as well, is that eligibility is no guarantee that your application will even get assessed. So they are
okay.
looking at really substantial applications that have good background. Their documentation is watertight. They have a very strong
Mm-hmm.
business plan. They have
Mm-hmm.
letters of reference. They have proof
Mm-hmm.
that people have been in active farm management and are going to bring those skills and expertise to Alberta. And they have a tangible way to get there in terms of the delivery of that plan.
Yes, the feasibility. Yes. My next question is, are there certain farm types or are there certain locations that tend to be viewed more favorably? For example, like the rural or the near cities, near the metropolitan cities, but it's just a little bit outskirt. Does that make a difference or not really?
So it could, because Alberta doesn't tell us, but we can infer certain things. And so you almost have to be a little bit of a detective when we're dealing with AAIP. And so
Mhm.
really spend some time with the AAIP website and then the links that they provide as well, because Alberta and many of the provinces and the federal government have increasingly moved towards metrics-based analysis, and they're forward projecting certain sectors and certain
Yep.
areas in which we just don't have the manpower, the staff, the people who are going to do the work. And so they're projecting, okay, what is going to be the needs, economic needs for the province going forward? So if you take a look in the Alberta website, they do have links to ALIS, so ALIS, and that is the website where they take a look at all the wage and the projections in terms of what sort of sectors and where we're going to have shortages in our labor force. So that's one thing to look at. The other
Mm-hmm.
way to kind of infer what are their priorities is to look at what's happening with respect to labor market impact assessments when we're looking at refusals to process in census metropolitan areas. So they are trying to prioritize areas outside of the CMAs. So that's one thing
Yeah.
federally. And then looking at the Alberta draws. And so even though it's not in FarmStream, they have been doing targeted draws under Express Entry in the agricultural sector category. So that gives
Mm-hmm.
you a bit of intel. If you take a look at that, you can see they did a number of ag draws last year. So it's people who had valid Express Entry federal profiles who had also registered for an EOI, and they were looking at managers in agriculture, so the NOC 80020, agricultural service contractors and farm supervisors, so the 82030. So we
Mm-hmm.
know that those were on the list every single time they did an ag draw under Express Entry last year. So they did February, April, May, June, July, September, and October. Those NOC codes were on the list. And then one of their draws actually was a little bit more targeted and they listed specific sectors. And so those sectors, to answer your question about what kind of sectors, meat
Mm-hmm.
product manufacturing, greenhouse nursery, fruit and vegetable, cattle ranching, hog and pig, oilseed and grain, crop production, poultry, dairy, animal production, sugar, forest
Mm-hmm.
nurseries. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. It looks like a wide range and seems like lots of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty broad. It's all primary production. And so that's one thing to keep in
Yeah.
mind with FarmStream. It must be primary production.
Yes. Okay. And now let's shift the focus a bit on the net worth, right? For it's one big documentation for the net worth and source of funds. And my question is, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to documenting the net worth for the applicant, and especially for applicants they have overseas assets or it's their family farms, it's being inherited, or they have been, on the family farms for few generations now. So how to document their net worth?
Yeah. And so this is a triaging question I usually have
Mhm.
for clients because I don't want to take a client that's not going to have a good chance of success. And I'm going to want to make sure that that person has at least a reasonable way of being able to show, yep, I have $500,000 in liquid or assets that I can make liquid. And here's the Canadian equivalency. And here is the provenance of those funds. Here's where I'm getting that money, because you're absolutely right. If it's a family farm and it's co-owned with siblings or parents or somebody else, then you need to show that there's going to be transfer of title, or maybe they're getting their percentage bought out and then they are just taking the cash and then using that to start a farm in Alberta. Um, Depending on which country, I've had a number of clients who are from European countries, and it's important to be able to show what your corporate structure was in your home country. So, were you a sole proprietor? Did you have incorporation? Was that corporation registered with other owners? And then, did you sell that farm or a portion of that farm in order to be able to have the funds to invest, or are you actively still managing that farm? And so that net worth is really going to be dependent on where's the client at in their business back home and how quickly do they want to try to invest in a farm in Alberta. And this always becomes a timing issue because it is going to take a very, very long time to get any sort of decision from Alberta on this potential nomination because they don't even have to accept your application. They don't have to commit to a timeline for looking at your application. They say that they will assess them when they get them. I would guess it's going to be at least 3 to 4 months before anybody hears back from Alberta. And then even if you do get a nomination, keep in mind this is not express entry linked. And so if you get a nomination, it's now a federal PR portal application through IRCC. And we know the
Mhm.
processing times for a PR portal application are 1 to 2 years.
Yes. 1 to 2 years without requesting further documents. If it's a very smooth sale, 1 to 2 years. If
Right.
not, 3+ years.
Hopefully not. Hopefully everything has been when you have that nomination up front. So the
Yeah.
interesting thing about FarmStream, if you take a look at the mechanics of that application, there's the FarmStream 004 application form, and then Alberta actually wants the applicant to have pre-prepared all of their federal forms. So the IMM8, the
Mm.
5669, all the family information forms. So basically, Alberta wants to know you're serious and you have everything else prepared so that if they give you a nomination, then you would be ready to submit that PR portal application.
Wow. Okay. So it's like combined PNP plus the federal upfront.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Wow. And okay, speaking about the liquidity and approval funds from our previous question, so what are the most common mistakes you've seen?
Yeah, so it's really important to very carefully look at the document checklist. So the farm stream has a specific document checklist, and I would recommend that you organize your application package according to that checklist. When you take a look at the checklist with respect to the personal net worth statement, it actually says that you require a certified true copy that has been prepared by an accountant. And so it has to have minimum net worth of 500,000 unencumbered Canadian equivalent funds. And often we've had some logistical difficulties trying to convince like a Swiss accountant, okay, well now I need you to do a certified copy of your net worth statement, and it might need to be that personal net worth in addition to the business net worth statement, because if that person still has interest in the farm that stays in the business but is going to be sold, you'll maybe need both. So just go through, make sure that you're looking at the certified copy of the accountant's net worth statement.
Right. And the certified copy should be come from the country of origin of the applicants.
So it could, I mean, and this is one thing to keep in mind with translations in general. The
Mhm.
translations, when you provide them, you first have to provide the original document. So in color, good quality scan of the original document with no stamps or marks or seals on them. And some countries are going to do apostilles. And so you've got to be careful about what are the certification requirements. But if you had the original, most people don't. They just get that electronic document directly from the accountant, and they will go somewhere locally to get a notary to do a certified copy. So if you do that, just make sure that the notary is somebody in the country of origin who is properly
Hmm.
able to notarize. If you're going to have that original document sent to Alberta and then you have the original, you can take it to somebody who is a certified translator in the province of Alberta.
Hmm. Okay. Right. And when you submit, it can be either French or English, or it's just preferably just English. Both, right?
Theoretically, it
Either
could
one?
be French or English. I have not seen anyone submit a French application. That said, one of my Swiss clients, some of the documents were in French just
Ah,
because that's
yeah.
how the documents were issued. Yeah,
Okay, okay. So if the original language is French, then you don't have to do any
correct.
translation.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Right, right. Okay, so let's move on to the business viability and active management requirement, right? So they're usually the key point for assessment. So what do officers actually they look for in terms of applicants' farming experience and capability, right? For example, will that be their farming years, for example, 10+ years? Is that important? Or maybe some types of produce or crops, like you mentioned, primary farming, or is it about how big the farm they manage, like 2 acres, 10 acres? Are those relevant?
I would say they're all relevant considerations. So the
Yeah.
interesting thing about FarmStream is Not only is it the only application where you can direct apply, but it's pretty much the only application where you don't have to prove post-secondary education. So they usually want you to have post-secondary education, but is not fatal to your application right off the bat if you don't have it. And so this is where when I look at clients who've been farming for the last 20 years, some of them did not complete post-secondary education. They didn't do a diploma or a degree, but they have 20 years of practical knowledge. And so Alberta says, okay, well, it is possible, but convince us, right? Convince us that this person knows what they're doing, has the business acumen, has the practical experience in order to be able to translate that into Alberta. And so not only do they need to show here's how big my farm was, here's profit and loss, the fact that you managed to run that farm. So the AAIP farm stream form actually asks you for 5 years of operations. So yes, you've been able to manage that successfully for at least 5 years, and you have letters of support from people saying that they understand that you're applying for this and that you have the ability with your suppliers to be providing solid services, that you've always paid your bills, that you are good to work with, you've been in farming associations, maybe you've been collaborating on seed varieties or things like that. And then also making sure that you're showing that you can actually translate those skills into Alberta. And so, one of the big things, again, you don't have to prove language, so you don't have to submit upfront language test results for FarmStream. But practically, if I speak with a client and they cannot communicate, that's a big risk because many of the provinces, as well as the federal government, look at language as an ability to become economically established. And especially if you're going to be doing farming and you need to have those relationships and create community, making sure that you have that English ability and the ability to connect to other farmers and the local community when you get to Alberta is important too.
Right. And would you suggest your clients to do their English or French test and have the language results submitted together with the rest of the documents? Or it's
It
not,
depends.
depends.
Yeah, it depends on their language capability. Um, some of my farm clients, like, are you kidding me? I am in the farm for like 12 hours a day. I do not have time to go write a language test. So I get it.
Yeah.
But if you have strong language and you have those language test results, then great. I would say yes, include them as long as it's above a CLB level 5, hopefully.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just not making you good.
It's
Like
maybe
if
not
it's
helpful,
4 or 3.
right? If you're below a 4, I don't think it's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And speaking of the evidence, so what makes a clear difference between active farming, like you mentioned those, right? Active farming and passive investment.
Yeah. And Alberta's pretty clear about this, not necessarily on the farm stream page, but on other sections of its website, it talks about entrepreneur and investment in general, and passive investment is not allowed. So if you're looking at the farm stream, you have to be actually managing this farm, and it has to be actively managed by you or your spouse or somebody in your family. It's not where you're just putting up capital in order to be able to have a business that is producing money on paper but is not actually producing goods, primary agriculture that is then being sold and distributed.
Right. What if it's a combination? So someone bought the farm in their country of origin, but previously they have no farming experience. They just bought the farm and started managing for 5 years. Does that count? Combination of active farming.
So here's what I would say. I would say put on your imaginary officer hat. And would
Hmm.
you have a concern if somebody has never had farm experience and they decide to buy a farm and then say that they're going to make a successful go of it? I would have concerns and I would want to know more. And I would say, okay, well, tell me how you're going to be successful. What is it that you think you have in your background or experience, or how have you done similar things in the past to show that you can make a successful go of this in Alberta?
Hmm. Yes. And that's very obvious, right? That's just a passive investment right there. Okay. And goes back to the reference letter you mentioned, right? To show they have the background, they have the experience. So, do you think which group, let's say, which group carries the most weight? Previous employer, or their suppliers, or their business partners, or just their family members?
So, in general, immigration tends to be suspicious of family members, right? Or if you try to write your own letter saying an affidavit, I certify I did, high level work for the last 15 years, that's not going to have a ton of evidentiary weight. But I always think it's important to take your clients as you find them and then try to draw out that information from them. So many times they'll give me a document and then I'll start asking them questions. Well, were you on an association? Were you part of a farm cooperative? Did you have somebody from your local liaison committee that can write a letter talking about your engagement within, how you changed the barns within your dairy cow practice to be able to make that a successful business? Can you get a letter from people who were coworkers or people who were selling you suckling pigs or something that's going to be tangible in terms of what you did? So, getting those letters from third parties. Sometimes people will have previous employment letters, but often for farmers, they don't have a ton of previous employment letters. And so it's harder to gather that evidence,
Mhm.
but it really depends on their personal circumstances and what's happened in their life to try to draw out from them, okay, can we give me some more details on this?
Right. Yes, it's more of a customization to different applicants' background and to dig more and yes, inspire them. Okay, let's move on to the business plan sensitivity and market feasibility for this farm stream. So, do you think it's realistic to put in such as the market condition, the local climate, or the water access analysis into the business plan? I mean, it's far broader, or let's say in more detail, more customized to the farm stream compared to just the regular business plan.
Yeah. So usually, the province encourages people to do exploratory visits, right? They don't want people
Mhm.
coming into this blind that have no idea what the local environment and weather and soil conditions are. And so, most people will have done a visit to come and take a look at various regions within the province or plots of land or talk to the local farming community. And so, you do definitely want to have a business plan that takes local conditions into account. And
Mhm.
especially given what's been going on in Alberta and across Canada with respect to wildfires, with respect to serious drought, with respect to our rivers in southern Alberta running dry and people not having
Yeah.
the ability to have their water licenses, all of those things are real practical problems that must be addressed in a pragmatic way. And so making sure that people understand if part of your plan was, well, I'm going to irrigate, do you actually have the water to be able to do that?
Hmm. Exactly. And maybe just the condition or the land condition, water condition this year is different from last year, or maybe it's different from 3 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so keep in mind that Alberta does say on its website the business plan is going to be reviewed by Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation to ensure that the farming operation actually aligns with Alberta farming industry requirements. And so if there are licenses, if there are requirements, if there are regulatory steps that people have not done their homework on, that's going to be a problem.
Yes, yes. And that drives my next question. So, what are the biggest mistakes, or let's say, uh, clients overlook when they plan the capital investment, especially, let's say, just say land purchase or the ownership restrictions type
Mhm.
of mistakes?
Yeah, and so one thing that I would say is make sure that you know what your expertise is and only give advice in that area of expertise. I am not a real estate
Mm.
lawyer. And so I would always refer people, you go talk to a good real estate lawyer, because Alberta, and many other places as well, and there's also federal legislation, has foreign ownership of land regulations. And these have been in place for a long period of time, but they change and you have updates to those regulations. And it's really, really important to know what the exceptions are, where the accepted land is. But in general, so there's a huge caveat that there's a whole bunch of fine print, but in general, it is not allowed for foreign citizens or foreign controlled corporations. So this is where it really depends on how is your client going to structure their investment? Are they just going to be a sole proprietor, or are they actually going to have a corporation? Is it going to be a Canadian controlled corporation or a foreign controlled? Who are their partners going to be? But in general, under the foreign ownership of land regulations, foreign citizens or foreign controlled corporations can only own up to 2 parcels of controlled land that cannot exceed 20 acres in total. And so if you don't know that, that is a giant problem right off the bat. So keep in mind that if you're going to structure a land purchase, make sure that you've got conditional subdivision approval on that purchase. And if that doesn't come through, then what's your exit plan? And then the other thing is if you do have a foreign national client who's committed to a purchase, what happens if they don't get their permanent residency? What happens if they don't get a nomination? Then what are they going to do?
Yes, that just bring the whole a sequence question. Yes. So start preparing the documents first, or confirm the checklist. You already have, most things ready, or start preparing for the business plan, or start doing, the audits back home. Like there's so many parts with
Yeah.
this project. And would you lay out for the sequence or the ideal sequence?
Yeah, and again, it really depends on the client as you find them. And so, where are they at, and understanding how ready are they? And this is where I talked about triaging the client from the beginning. If they are not serious and they're just kind of, well, maybe I'll do this, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to go very far. So, the first thing that I normally tell them to do is go get a business plan, because you've got to commit to actually working with somebody. They're going to take a look at your proposed activities with you and come up with something substantial. Um, have that business plan kind of ticking away in the background, and then start taking a look at, okay, what sort of documentation do you have? What sort of business viability, legitimacy documentation do you have for your existing farm? Get translations if you need to have translations. Start working on that net worth statement from the accountant, because it's tax time in Alberta, and trying to get an accountant to write you a giant net worth statement right now is going to be challenging to find somebody to give you that time. So, same thing with accountants overseas. They are busy and it takes a while to get at least a first draft from them. And then, normally, once you get the first draft, you might need to get more details, or at least the certified translation if it's not in English. So, it depends on the client, it depends on where they're at, but the business plan, the net worth statement, and then the next thing is, how diligent are your clients in terms of form preparation? Because they need to be writing down everything in their immigration forms in addition to, so all of their history, all of their family, all of the identity documents for them and their kids, and have they come to Canada before? And where are they when they're doing this application? So place of submission as well.
Right, right. And when everything hopefully goes by the sequence and everything is submitted and approved, no, actually before approved, they need to do the interview. Like 100% there will be an interview for them, right?
I cannot see any scenario where they do not get interviewed. I would be shocked and appalled. Maybe it's possible, but Alberta has been pretty strong in terms of wanting to interview people, and they've been going through some program integrity, and they've been spending, or I've seen more officers interviewing people, and not necessarily for FarmStream, because we are talking about maybe a handful. maybe a handful. But in terms of other applications, when they are interviewing people, they're literally going back and they're digging. And so, for example, on express entry applications with accelerated tech, where you have an employer who has to have done an employer declaration, they're literally going back and cross-referencing that business license from the employer to see that it's matching with the addresses. And if it isn't, or
Yeah.
if their corporate registration has lapsed, they're canceling the nomination. So and they are calling employers and they are checking, and are you physically working in this location? Are you doing hands-on work? Is it like in Alberta rather than a partially hybrid job? They are checking all those things because Alberta really wants people who have a strong connection to Alberta and are likely to stay and settle in Alberta. They do not want anybody who's going to fly in, satisfy their requirements on paper, and then take off to Ontario or BC.
Right, right. And just my quick follow-up question about the interview. So, the clients, they may be overseas, right? When you submitted the whole application. How are they gonna participate in the interview? Can it be done by phone call or they have to fly in?
So, good question. Uh, I don't know because it's up to Alberta and it's up to the officer. And so in the past, it
Mhm.
used to be that they had said it was a in-person interview that it's required. Many of the entrepreneur streams say that you do have to have a required visit, right? So they want people to come physically to Alberta in order to show that they are serious. Um, I don't know if Alberta will require everybody to come in person, but they do definitely do phone interviews. What they normally do is they send an email saying, "We want to talk to you, let's arrange a time." And then they do a phone interview. And then it's really up to that officer to take it from there in terms of, do they think this person is legit? Do they think that they're serious? And then if there is, then it's up to that officer to either escalate it to a manager or to refuse it or to do follow up.
Right, right, right. And for interviews, I think that that's my last question related to the interview. So, because the refusal rate in this stream is quite low, right? But given the total applicants, they're not much anyway, right? And what if the interview didn't go well? Do they get a second chance to submit more documents or have a second round of interview? Or are they given second chance?
Yeah. In general, no. AAIP is mean. I would never recommend, and I'm sorry if any AAIP officers are out there listening, maybe not mean, maybe extremely by the book and only assessing what is given in the first instance. Um, Essentially, all of the AAIP programs are oversubscribed, right? We have so many people applying for so few spots that, in my experience, officers just don't care to try to do anything to go above and beyond to save an application. If you don't meet absolutely everything we've asked you for plus more, we're just not going to follow through with you. We're not going to nominate you. It's your problem, basically. And so I would always make sure that when you're preparing an application, you never rely on a second chance, or you never expect that they're going to ask you for more documents. Give it to them well organized, nicely laid out, clearly establishing how you're qualified right from the beginning.
Right. Yes, yes. And for the farm stream, I will say, like most of the applicants, they will not make the purchase before they received at least a nomination, right? And when will they be purchase the land? After the got PR? I mean, just speaking from your own experience.
People are funny. People do all sorts of things. And so I might advise somebody, are you really going to buy that much land if you have no guarantee you're going to get your nomination or permanent residence? And some people are like, yep, I'm going to. Okay. All right. If you're okay with that risk. And that's my job as a lawyer, right? My job as a lawyer is to say, okay, here are the risks. Here are the practical potential problems with this plan. If you've assessed those risks and you still want to go forward, that is your choice. But yes, it is an interesting dynamic because at a certain point, you have to have a strong enough reason that you're going to invest. So if, for example, there's no land available in the region that you want to start producing a certain crop, then Alberta's going to say it's not a viable plan, right? And so
Yeah.
you've got to make sure that you have, if your plan is, I'm not going to buy until I get nomination, well, you better show that there's going to be a parcel of land or a production or a farm that you can purchase when you want to purchase it. Otherwise, maybe you do have to put in a conditional purchase offer that's going to be conditional on all these things, subdivision of the 20 acres, et cetera, where you think that you can resell that land fairly easily.
Right, right, right. So for some clients, they may just commit and buy within the limit, like under 20 acre, and
Right.
they can start farming, or they don't because there's a like the status situation, right? They cannot really work on the
Right.
farm.
And so this is my big concern is if somebody does buy and they're physically here. So sometimes, especially people from Europe who don't need to have a visa to come to Canada, they sometimes just come and go all the time with an electronic travel authorization. And so, in that case, if you're here and you're just visiting, well, then I'm always worried that immigration is going to say, are you working without authorization in Canada? Because work under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act is extremely broad. It can be anything for which wages are paid, commission is earned, or a Canadian would normally get paid, or you're entering the Canadian labor market. So it is risky if you're here and you own a farm and you're living on the farm, and then you have to prove to immigration, I'm not working, I'm not getting my hands dirty, I'm not earning income, right? And so this becomes, you still have to always show temporary intent as a visitor or a student or a worker. And sometimes it might be possible for the current owner of that farm to go through and get a labor market impact assessment and employ you as a farm manager in the meantime while you were working on your PR application. So you're allowed to have a dual intent under Section 22, but take a look at all these logistics and think about it carefully and talk to an immigration lawyer about what your plan is to make sure that you're not blindsided.
Right, right. So just to the point you mentioned, so they can also apply for LMIA owner operator for a work permit. In the meantime, submit the farm stream.
So LMIA owner operator is problematic because you have to be the owner and you have to be able to employ somebody. But they could work for an arm's length employer who has their own existing Canadian business who just wants to do an LMIA while they're trying to feel each other out to see, oh, should I actually sell my operation to this person? Maybe I'll hire them as a farm manager, farm supervisor for a year, see how they work out, get them trained up with my farm, and then maybe they will get a nomination, hopefully, and then maybe one day they'll get PR, and then I can sell the farm to them. So you might have an option there,
Mm,
but it depends on the employer and who the Canadian owner is of the farm.
right. Okay. It seems like some, options and a combination of options for
Mhm.
them. And yes, so that brings to my last question. So for applicants, they already in Canada, right? Let's say they already in. So can they do research while they are here, but not working? They're just depending on decides on which land to buy, but they're just here.
Yes, yes. Just make sure that anybody who's physically here has valid temporary authorization. So some countries, nationals of some countries require visas, some of them just require an ETA. Make sure that they don't stay for longer than 6 months at a time because that's the general duration unless an officer gave them a shorter duration on entry. So you can
Right.
do research, you can have these exploratory visits, but most of
Yep.
the time an officer is going to ask, how are you supporting yourself? What's the reason for you coming here? And you have to have an honest response. So,
Okay. Okay. So if let's say if they stay 3 months in a row, does that count one exploratory visit? Or if they visit like multiple communities within Alberta, that counts like three exploratory visits.
so there's no requirement for an exploratory visit. Some provinces do
Mm.
have a requirement for a certain number within a certain period of time. Alberta just asks you on the forms, have you come? Have you explored? What have you done? When did you do that? So they're
Huh.
just asking you for details, but there's not a mandatory requirement per se.
Okay, okay. That part is quite flexible
Oh, cool.
compared to, yeah. Okay, so I think that concludes all of our session question, but let me quickly check anyone has more question. So feel free to drop a line in the Q&A chat box, everybody, so I can ask Alicia. Let's see. Okay, maybe not now. Okay. Yes, we have one question from Patricia, right? She's asking, in a farm on an LMIA work permit as farm manager, they would have to still have 5 years of experience.
Um,
Or how much experience do they need to show?
so I'm not sure if I understand exactly what Patricia's asking, but she's saying if they were to come in the meantime on an LMIA, how much experience do they have to show to get their work permit approved?
Now, I think she is asking this applicant, oh, if they're already here on a work permit. Yes, someone already here on a work permit, working on a farm, and they wanted to apply LMIA as a farm manager. So the requirements, does that the 5 year farming experience relevant to their LMIA application?
So there's two applications. So one would be the AAIP Farm stream, the other would be an LMIA-based work permit. And so if the person is already here and they're working currently under an LMIA, and they want to show that they're using this experience in order to apply for a farm stream, they might be able to do that. If they, usually an LMIA is only valid for a couple of years, depending on what the wage
Yeah,
level
2, 3
is.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you normally only have 2 to 3, and also it depends on your passport expiry. So that means that you would have to have another LMIA. So either the current employer is going to have to re-advertise and try to get another LMIA, or you have to find a second employer who's going to go through the whole LMIA process. LMIAs right now are making me pull out my hair. It's a whole other ball of wax. It is darn near impossible to get an LMIA in any reasonable period of time. It's really taking a very long time right now. So that's one thing. If you're looking at relying on current work experience that requires an LMIA, this is not an easy pathway. It requires preparation ahead of time. Agriculture, farm stream, those NOCs tend to be a little bit better in terms of LMIA processing, but the employer needs to be able to show that they've been doing this business and the person is qualified. And so this is where the years of experience come in. And so
Yeah.
if you have a very new farm manager who doesn't have a lot of experience, it's hard to get that initial LMIA approved because you have to prove federally to an IRCC officer you're qualified to do the job of a farm manager. And that's a fairly high knock. And so you do require years of experience. So take a look at the knock requirements in terms of years of experience in order to be able to show that it's realistic that you can effectively do that job in Canada. So then if we use that Canadian farm experience to then be the basis of an AAIP application, then where are they getting the money, right? How did they save up $500,000 if they've only been working, in an LMIA based wage rate, which is not going to be probably high enough to accumulate wealth unless you have previous investments or you have family trusts or something like that that have been held outside of Canada.
Right, that's in another documents they need to prepare beforehand or planning before they wanted to apply the farm stream. Right. Okay. I think that's just that concludes the question from Patricia. Okay. So I think we can take one more question. Okay, Sophie. So she's asking, does study in an agricultural program counts as farm management experience?
So maybe it's one of the things. And if you're asking for, will this be enough to satisfy an officer under AAIP that this farm stream applicant is legitimate? I would say that's going to be a tougher case. It's going to be a steeper hill to climb, because unless this person can show that they've been managing a farm for 5 years, that they've taken on the risk of that, like not just that they're working for somebody else, but they actually were invested and it was their money, it was their capital, and they took on the business
Yeah.
risk. And so if you're only doing a program, there's very little risk if you're just a participant in an agricultural program. So yes, maybe you have a little bit of hands-on experience and it might be something that you can draw upon, but I wouldn't say that it's going to be a super strong application if that's the only experience that that applicant has.
Yeah, yeah. And Sophie clarified a little bit, the agricultural program has hands-on work component on the primary agricultural activities.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Alicia. It's limited. The time, right? How long a study program can run, maybe 2 years, right? And not all the 2 years you're hands-on and having risk on your capital,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So, Sophie, I would say it's one factor, but if that's all that your candidate has, I wouldn't say that it's a strong application for a farm stream if they don't also have their own business where they were actively managing a primary production farm themselves or with their family.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yes, a combination of experience, right? Maybe a little bit here in Canada, but a lot from their country of origin, right? Not just depending on the study program here, or like Patricia mentioned, it's not just the LMIA work experience here in Canada, but
Right.
more from what they've done back home.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I mentioned LMIA, it was literally just a stopgap measure for them to get a little bit more experience in Canada, maybe a way to work with that, whoever's selling the farm in Canada, as a short-term measure. But assuming that that person already has 5 or 10 years plus of active farm management of their own farm back in Canada and or outside of Canada. Most
Mhm.
people, well, it depends on their life circumstances, but most people don't want to sell their farm abroad until they know they've got some place to land in Canada.
Yes, exactly. That's the timing where people make the decision to purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Alicia. I think we're right on our schedule. And maybe we can take one more question if there's anyone who wants to ask the final question here. Okay, let's see.
And if there's nothing, I can just sum up
Yeah.
just by
Yeah, go
saying,
ahead, Alicia.
yeah, just tread carefully and manage expectations. And so I'd say triage right up the off the front. And if you really don't think that your client is going to be a good candidate for FarmStream, tell them here are all the practical hurdles, right? Make sure that they
Yeah.
understand what they're getting into. And if they say, no, you know what, that's not the program for me, take a look at the other programs. Find a pathway that's going to be better suited to your client and have a better chance of success. If this is really a good fit, then great. But make sure that you're also managing client expectations, because just like I said from the beginning, there are no guarantees. And so even if you prepare a perfect application, it might go in the mail, and that's the other thing. This is a mail-in application. It's literally print out a million pages and put it in like tracking with signature and hope that it gets there. Um, in those 2 weeks where you're sending that by mail, they might close the program, especially as the year goes on, right? Or they might say that we've met our allocation target for the year in other programs, and that's it. We just closed down AAIP. They've done that before. And so make sure that your clients know there are no guarantees with this application. You could do your best, and sometimes, hopefully, most of the time, things will work out, but it's possible that they will change the playing field midway through.
Right. Yes, let's just hope they will keep it open at least for this year, 2026. And do we know any like where they're at for the processing? Like
Yeah,
how much
so
they've already allocated?
so in the general allocations, we know that out of the 6,403, they've already
Mhm.
issued 1,127 nominations, and these were stats for February, so they haven't updated them yet for March. So they've already issued over 1,000. There are 1,253 applications in the queue. So even though we're only
Okay.
3 months into the year, there are already, basically 1,000 given and 1,000 in processing in other
Yeah.
streams.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if we take a look at the entrepreneur streams, all four entrepreneur streams, and I would guess that
Mhm.
the lion's share of those are not under farm stream. There might be like
Yeah.
5 under farm stream, but there are 266 applications in various stages of processing
Mhm.
already in the entrepreneur streams. And keep in mind, the nomination allocation for all year this year is only 90. So that's something to
90.
think about.
Very slim. Uh, Thank you so much, Alicia. And thank you, everybody. So you can always drop me a line and I can share Alicia's information to you if you wanted to co-counsel. And by the way, Alicia, do you offer co-counseling for this program?
Um, what we do have, so Holthe Immigration Law, we have a lot of website information. So we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel, we have a live Q&A. We also have consultations. So I also take consultations from consultants and other lawyers who want me to give them an opinion on what's going on with their file. So we do definitely do that. You can book our consultations through our website.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alicia. And have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thanks, Giselle.